the most common reason for using something like Kontakt is to grab a sample and stick it on the keyboard to be able to play it, to be able to transpose it up or down and trigger it in real time. The advantage of using a sampler over, say for example, dropping audio into your DAW is the fact that you've got that ability to perform the sample. Whereas if you've got it in your arrange window and you're kind of duplicating, then you don't get the ability to take the transposition up or down or trigger it. You've got to copy and paste and just put things in on that arrange window, which is a different approach. A lot of people over the years, so many classic dance tunes were made by using samplers and having that ability to trigger the samples. So a very common example of this would be to drag a chord sample onto the keyboard and to be able to play it up and down in pitch. Now I've got Kontakt in standalone mode again. I've got a selection of 3 chord samples. These are from the battery library. So let's have a listen. So each of these would be really useful to start off a track idea. And let me show you how easy it is. That's the first sample here that I like the sound of. If I want to map it onto the keyboard to play it, all I do is just double click and it's ready to go. So that's the classic chord sampled flavor. And I think that sounds fantastic. Let me just open this up. And I've got a couple of things I want to show you, the mapping editor and the wave editor. These are available on the actual single interface here, but they can be broken out. So look at this. I can click this arrow to take the mapping editor out and the wave editor as well. So this gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of, you could drop these off on an external monitor or something, but it's really nice to be able to see these and get clear control over what's happening. Now the mapping editor is basically taking the sample and placing it onto the keyboard. You can see it's been spanned down here to C-1 and then going all the way up here to B7. So this is what we call a zone. You can pick this up and change the spanning. Now how it is fine. The root note you can see here is C3. Basically it's kind of like a central point. So if I play C3, it's going to be exactly the same pitch as the original sample. If I take it higher, it's going to play faster and higher, and take it lower, it's going to play lower in pitch and play slower. These are the pitch and time rules that most samplers follow. Funnily enough, Kontakt can break free of those rules, so I'll show you that on another video. But for the moment, this is it, nice and simple. And it's really great that you can see the progress of the sample playing here on the sample, the loop editor here. So notice it does progress faster as I'm taking it higher in pitch. You can change the sample start point, but I would recommend you go from the DFD mode on the source to sampler. DFD is basically streaming the sample from disk, whereas sampler is triggering it from memory. So I can pick up the start point. So you get loads of variety out of a single sample if it's got sufficient length and variation in the sound. So that's great. Really like it from that point. But have you noticed that it fades down in volume? So this is a disadvantage when you're working with sampled sounds. It's like you think to yourself, okay, well now if I had a synth, I could basically work with the envelopes and extend the sound because it's being generated using analog synthesis or FM or whatever method. But here is a recording of a sound. That's what a sample is. It's a recording of a chord sound. So if I want to extend this, what I need to do is to find a point and to loop it. Okay, so we've got this technique. It's allowing us to take something and make it sound for longer. So on the sample loop section down here, we can click on number 1 and you can see now we've got a loop section that appears. If you move your cursor up to the top portion of it, you see it turns into this arrows with a line, and what I'm trying to do is pick up the boundaries and bring this over and try to find a good loop point. And finding a good loop point is kind of hard. You know, what you need to do is to find the very beginning and the end at similar levels. So on the vertical scale, that's probably a good starting point. So, and also think about the tone as well. You know, so we're going to try and find a good loop. Let me just see how that sounds. There's a little bit of a click on there, all right? And there's a reason for that. Let me just show you something. There's a little icon we use for this. Come down here and we're going to click on loop edit. And you can basically see the end and the start of the loop, and they're not matching up. Can you see there's a jump here, for example? That's creating a click. We could get down here and start adjusting it. Can you see this? So let's just see if we can find something. It's basically really hard to find a match for both left and right sides of the waveform. You can really get a sense of that now. I'm going to move this over, see if I can get something a bit closer. No, it's pretty tricky. So there's a function that's built in, and we can come down, drop down this menu here. So find loop end short or long. The only difference is that one tries to find a shorter, a closer point, and the other one kind of flings it out a bit longer. So I'm going to try short. So look, it's trying to match these up. Let me just see how that sounds. It's not bad at all. It's quite nice, in fact. So what I'm going to do is just try the crossfade here. So it's going to apply a crossfade at the beginning and end of the loop. It's got a real old school vibe to it. You know, this is the thing about sampling. So we can actually extend the notes now. We can play as long as we want. It is a little bit obvious on there. So you could try extending that crossfade. Maybe even try flinging that right loop point out. That's not bad at all. Sometimes that slowing down, speeding up vibe sounds really, really interesting on a track, you know. So, you know, what we're doing here is we're taking a sample and we're finding a point to loop it and just extend that out. You know, it's really, really nice to get that control. So, you know, this is a real kind of fundamental of using a sampler like Kontakt. Just grab a sample, chuck it into the rack. It creates the instrument for you automatically, and then dive in there onto the actual loop editor and just try and find a nice a loop point for a sample you want to extend.